As coaches, we want to improve movement. The ways we can achieve this is unlimited. Different cues, different tools. I like to think about this as a huge toolbox inside our head with different boxes we can open to try different cues, different tools until we succeed to improve the movement. That's what I want to talk to you about today. A lot of the cues and tools I am discussing today are based on the dynamic systems theory. I am one of the few lucky students who got taught by Frans Bos himself during my bachelor's here in Eindhoven. I'm very happy I got to learn from him and that I now get to share this knowledge with others. If you would like to know more about the dynamic systems theory or motor learning processes in general, you should definitely check out his book. I will put the link in the description below. The first box inside our toolbox is filled with these categories: verbal cues, visual cues and tactile cues, as CrossFit like to use these a lot in their courses. Verbal cues being everything you say. For example, hey, I want you to open your chest. Visual cues being showing the athlete what you really mean by that. So for example, hey, I see you do this, I really want you to do more of this. Tactile cues being you touching the athlete or using something that touches the athlete to clarify what you mean. For example, pulling the shoulders backwards to open the chest. But there's more. The second box inside our toolbox is filled with internal focus and external focus cues. Internal focus cues being you mentioning something that's happening inside the body during the movement. For example, hey, your hips are in a larger angle than your knee angle. Try to decrease the angle on your hips in the next squat. External focus is something bigger than the athletes. It's outside of their body. So for example, try to squat with your ass to the grass. External focus cues are generally more successful than internal focus cues. The athlete can better comprehend what you mean and therefore tend to choose the right movement pattern sooner. A combination of both is best, but if you have to choose a majority of your cues as external focus. With these cues and tools in these categories, you already have a lot of options to choose from. But our toolbox is not complete yet. There are more boxes with more tools and cues you can choose from to successfully improve movement. The categories that are about to come will touch on all of these categories we talked about earlier so far. Working with constraints. This basically means creating a situation that forces the athlete to choose the right movement pattern. Using metaphors. This is explaining what you mean by using an easy to comprehend metaphor or analogy. Adding a double task. Adding an extra task to the movement could stimulate the body to choose the right movement pattern. Endpoint focus learning. If the end point of a movement is not clear, it might be very difficult for the body to understand the movement pattern to get there. So paying attention to the end point or end position is very important in motor learning. Differential learning. This means practicing the movement in a lot of different ways and variants. This could stimulate the motor learning process because from every attempt, every practice, every variant, the body will take some information to choose the right movement pattern. Now let's have a look at the practical application of all these tools. I will first show you some examples for using constraints. The first example is an athlete with knee dominance in a squat. So the athlete is struggling to reach full depth of the squat. The heels are also coming off the floor. The constraint you can use is a bench behind the athlete. The task is to touch the bench every squat. This will make sure the hips will move backwards a bit more and the heels will be on the floor as well. Next up is an athlete struggling with staying upright during an overhead squat. The constraint you can use here is something in front of the athlete. This could be a wall, this could also be a rig or something else, PVC pipe for example. This will make sure the athlete is upright more, because when you lean forward you will hit the wall. You might see there is a decrease in depth when athletes perform an overhead squat like this, but I prefer good movement quality first, a good movement pattern, and then we will work on the depth. Next up is an athlete struggling with the knees caving in during a squat, so there's not enough external rotation from the hips. We can fix this by using a mini band. This is a well-known constraint. You place the mini band right above the knees. The task is to push the elastic band outwards and create as much tension on the elastic band as possible. The next example is an athlete struggling with moving from the hips while hinging forward. The movement's coming from the spine instead of the hips. The constraint you can use here is a PVC pipe on the spine, and the task is to stay in touch with the PVC the entire movement. This could only be done with a straight spine and hinging from the hips. Next up is an athlete struggling with the right ankle stiffness and foot tension during jumping for double unders or single unders. The constraint you can use here is a sound, for example, a clap in the hands. The task is to leave the ground during the clap, so that's a short ground contact moment. This again can only be done with the right amount of ankle stiffness. The next example is an athlete struggling with keeping the bar close during a clean. The same constraint can be applied here as for the overhead squat, placing something in front of the athlete to force them to keep the bar close. This could be the wall or the rig as long as it's safe, but this could also be you as a coach. I often go stand in front of the athlete and telling them to keep the bar closer and please don't hit me with the bar. They always get a bit nervous for this, but the movement pattern will get so much better. Then let's take a look at some examples for using metaphors and analogies. An athlete who is struggling with the knees caving in during a squat, you can say to them, tear the ground apart, or try to push the ground apart with your feet. An athlete who is struggling with using the hips during a kipping movement, like kipping pull-up for example, you can say to them, jump from your hips. You want to jump your hips over, for example, a hurdle. An athlete who is struggling with the right tension during a handstand, you can say to them, I want you to be so tight that you are raw spaghetti, not cooked spaghetti. Athletes who are struggling with using the hips or the violent hip extension during snatches or cleans, you can say to them, I want you to jump backwards, as if you were doing a somersault backwards. Now I will show you some examples for using a double task. An athlete is struggling with sticking the landing after a clean. So he's struggling with finding the balance after the clean. The task could be lift one leg after you land the clean. This can only be possible if you stick the landing, if you found balance in the landing. Someone is struggling with the falling phase in the butterfly pull-up, so struggling with the rhythm. An important phase in this rhythm is the phase where you fall through the arch position to get back into the next swing. The task here could be close your eyes during the falling phase, during the falling movement, and then try to extend that moment. You can also let the athletes say something themselves. So for example, the rhythm and movement order from a push jerk, so down, up, down, that could be difficult to understand. You can let them say something during the movement. For example, 1, 2, 3, or down, up, down. Or in Dutch, we use pindakaas. Now we'll have a look at the endpoint focus learning. Focusing on the end point of a movement to stimulate the motor learning process can be very useful in cleans, for example, or snatches. During the learning process, make sure you focus also on learning the front squat and overhead squat. If the body knows where to end, where the end point of the movement is, it's way more easy for the body to figure out how to get there. This is the same for kipping pull-up, for example. Teach a strict pull-up first, chin-up holds, pull-up holds to make sure the body knows where to get to. Then we have differential learning. The possibilities with differential learning are unlimited. You can vary between exercises, you can perform complexes, for example in weightlifting. You can vary in material, for example a bar, a PVC pipe or a bag filled with water. You can vary in surfaces, you can vary in footwear, for example some exercises without shoes. You can vary between intensity or pre-fatigue. Every variant, every exercise will give the body some information to figure out the right movement pattern. So to close out, my takeaway points from this video are: externally focused feedback works usually better than internally focused feedback. Try to say something that is easy to understand instead of focusing on the details. Play around with all these tools. I think this is a possibility to show your creativity as a coach, and I think it's the most fun part about coaching. If you thought this video was helpful, then please like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments down below, and I will see you next time.